in 1513. Politics went all wrong, and it has nothing to do with, it was way before the United States was a country, in 1513. That's what Catholic theologians who study politics have come to the conclusion of. Because Catholic theologians had to get into politics and they had to get into history in the 19th century when all the different philosophical movements were discovering history, and they said, oh, you poor Christians, you talk, but you don't know how to change history. And then we had movements like Marxism and communism, which claimed we know how to change history. You Christians talk about history and you suffer it and you wait for it to end, but you don't know how to change it. And that spurred the church to begin to study history and to get a theology of history and a theology of politics. Because they helped us. What those movements helped us to realize is that the church has to have a theology of politics and it has to have a theology of history. And one of the conclusions is that things went wrong in 1513, because that's when Machiavelli published his book, The Prince. And Machiavelli opened the door and made it increasingly easier for people to separate morality and politics. And so, Machiavelli so famously said, yes, everybody can feel what they ought to do. Everybody knows what they ought to do, but most people don't do what they ought to do. And so if you are going to be a politician and you're going to stick to what you ought to do, you're going to fail. And so what you need to do is you need to simply do what works, and forget about what you ought to do. And that was in 1530. And so that started a trend in politics in which people began to more and more feel that they were going to take a practical approach to politics by separating morality and religion, especially religious morality, from their politics. That's a very interesting, if you look over, so what our Catholic theologians say is if you look over the whole sweep of history and you look at it in terms of theology and politics, that's where it took a really bad turn in 1513 in a little town called Florence, Italy. I think it's really interesting on this day to remember, who did we learn to be American from? Who taught us how to be American? We were talking yesterday at the Mass about how we often don't learn things so much by what people say and what they teach us, is we learn them we catch the sense of what people care about. We feel from the other person. We sense from the other person what they long for, what they hope for, what they wake up in the morning caring about. And that sort of comes through to us, and we can feel them where at the center of their heart is when it comes to things. And so I think it's interesting to ask, who taught us to be American? Who taught you to be American? Who taught me to be an American? Not so much by their words, but by watching them act. And for us to kind of go, oh, that's what it means to be American. It just came through to us by paying attention to their hearts and their heart's desire and the way they lived their life. And for me, I was thinking, I know who that person is for me. And it's my grandfather, and I've told the story here before, and so I won't tell the whole story. I'll just try to make it really quick. He was... One of the things I loved about my grandfather is he never wore anything except overalls, except full overalls with the little spender. What do they call those? Full overalls? What do they call them? Bib overalls. I never saw the man ever in my life, except when he was in his casket, when he didn't have bib overalls on. Because he had been a farmer, and he had lost the farm in the Depression, and he had been a horse trainer, and now he had to run a gas station to make a living, and he still wore those bib overalls. And he had a little Hillman car. I don't know if probably nobody knows what a Hillman car is. It was just a little crazy British car. And he chewed tobacco, so he'd spit out the window, and of course what would happen is that the wind would blow some of it back in on the back seat. And so if you were a kid and you had to sit in the back seat, it was speckled with tobacco juice. And what was great about my grandfather, one of the things that was great about my grandfather, is that he lived in a town where there was a Native American reservation nearby, and many people wouldn't, and there was 2 gas stations, and the other gas station wouldn't sell to the Native Americans, and he would. And I used to work for him at his gas station in the summertime. And he would tell me, and he didn't tell me very much. He not a talkative guy. He worked the way most men work. They work silently. They don't talk to each other a lot. But he did say to me a couple of times, he said, it doesn't matter the color of a man's skin. His character is the only thing that matters. And he would sell gas to the Native Americans and so he paid a price in that town of 300 people where everybody knew everything about everybody. And I would walk with him to lunch every day, and he would walk with a kind of nobility across the street and down the block to the little cafe to get chicken soup. And people would talk about him, and they would point fingers at him, and they would whisper about him, and he didn't care. He had taken a stand in that town as a man of character, as an American of character. He had taken a stand in that town, and he paid the price for it, and he didn't care. And he kept his nobility, and he just did it. And he's the kind of man who came from that generation, and some of you are from that generation, where people talked about character a lot. You know, people don't talk about character a lot nowadays. My generation doesn't anyway, boomers. He was of that generation that had gone through the Depression. They talked about character all the time. And when he didn't talk about it, but he lived like that was the most important thing. And you would pick it up just by being around him. You'd pick up. And I think he would just be mystified by what it means by the political scene nowadays in our country. All the issues. Because I don't think he'd be in care about all the issues. I think he would say, what's your American character? I don't care about this or that. What's your character as an American? Where have you taken a stand on an American value and paid the price? You show me your American character. That's all he would have cared about. He would have said, let's do you think you're a big American? Well, let's do a little stress test on your character and see where the fractures in your character are. He would have been interested in our American character. I know he's interested still in my American character. He wasn't an issue guy, but he did want to know where are the stress fractures in your American character? Then we better attend to those, and you better take a better stand, and you better pay a price for it. And shut up about it. Just be quiet and do it. That's what he would have told me, I'm pretty sure. So what happened at this big turn in 1513 when it became more and more a trend to separate politics and character, politics and morality? De Tocqueville, when he was here in America in the early 1800s, he noticed what he called worrisome trend in Americans, is that Americans had a tendency, he loved many things about America and saw many positive things, but he saw something that bothered him, and that was that Americans tended to think if they could just tinker with government and programs and policies, and if they could tinker with it and they could get that perfect, then they didn't have to be good people anymore. If they could get everything running perfectly the way we do, because Americans are so good with machines and technology, if we could just get everything running perfectly, then that would be perfect and we wouldn't have to be good. We could get everything else good, and so we didn't have to be good people. And that is completely the opposite of all of the classical understanding of, and the Catholic understanding of politics, which is good politics needs good people. Good people make good policies. Good people make a good country. You can't have a good country without good people. You can't have good laws without good people. And so I think my grandfather he would never have known all this theoretical blah, blah, blah. He just knew that your American character was what was important. In those days when I went to school, you got your grade, and then you got your character report. They kept a character report on you, and your teacher had to fill it out. I don't think my dad ever looked at the grades much. I don't think he cared. But I'll tell you what, he scrutinized the character one. And he let you know if you were messing up here, 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 and here, here, and you better change. That was the generation. That generation could hold together the practicality of politics, but the need for character. And they could do both. And they weren't trying to get the machinery to run so well that it would be perfect while they could be devils. Instead, they knew it was their responsibility to be a kind of person that would make the machinery run well. I love what the Apostle Paul says in our second reading. It's one of the most beautiful scriptures. It's one of the most wonderful portions of Scripture. And it tells us what we need to do whenever we're in a situation where the morality has dropped out. Well, then we need to put the morality that dropped out. We need to put back in what dropped out. And look how St. Paul doesn't tell us what it is. He doesn't say, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. Listen to how he tells us what we need to do. It's absolutely genius and quite beautiful. Brothers and sisters, have no anxiety at all. Whatever is true, put back in whatever is true. You decide what it is, but put it back into the situation. Where it's lacking truth, you put it back in. Whatever it is, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, whatever is excellent. When that's missing, you add it. You put it back in. That's about American character. That is an absolutely beautiful, 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 because he doesn't tell us what it is. He puts it to us and says, it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility of your conscience to see whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just and pure and lovely and gracious and excellent. Put that into situations where it isn't. I think that's the challenge then for us on this 4th of July. We know that this is an incredibly wonderful and great country and has done amazing things for humanity. But as our opening prayer said, there has been great work, but there is also something to do. And there is always something for faithful Christian citizens to do. It's to look at the situation and say, what's being left out? I'll put it back in with the help and the grace of God.